Hi, Chris McClune here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this episode of our podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about lighting. Specifically, we're going to be talking about white light, our scene lighting. There is a lot that goes along with that that you may not be thinking of when you're getting ready to spec a truck. We're going to talk a little bit about what you should be considering as you are writing your specifications to make sure that you're speccing the appropriate lighting for the job that you want it to do. Along with me today is John Sestrom. He's a product manager with Whelen. And John, thank you very much for joining me today. It's kind of funny as I was thinking about this today. I was thinking about the scene lighting that I have used throughout my fire service career. And I remember we had a rescue truck. It was an 89 Salisbury rescue truck. It was built on a Spartan chassis, and it had, we were always, lighting up. We were the ones who were always lighting up the area because there were these two large light towers that came up from the back. They each had two quartz lights on them, halogen quartz. They did put out quite a bit of light, but they only went up and down. It was kind of like, how are you going to get this to where you want it to go? I guess we were just kind of looking to floodlight everything, so with as much as possible. Then, we replaced a couple of pumpers. The original pumpers I used just had two quartz lights on the side. Again, they just went up and down. They weren't particularly bright. They were really more for around the truck. But when we replaced them, we added light towers that, could articulate a little bit. They actually, these went up, they turned. I honestly don't remember if they went up and down. They must have also, panned and tilted.
Yeah, probably.
But I mean, it really is amazing to me to see how far we've come. And then you look at what's available today from your company and lighting manufacturers and all the intelligence that's being built into these. It really is quite, you don't normally think about it, just what these lighting systems can do today. So I apologize. I talked a little bit too much there. I do want to, I want you to do most of the talking today because you're the expert here, but we're going to get into a bunch of different topics with that. But I think to get us started and to kind of set the stage, Whelen is looking at, scene lighting, white lighting, and tell me if I'm wrong. When I think of white lighting, I'm just thinking of the scene lighting, either right at the truck or beyond. But there are a number of challenges that come along with that. And so I guess to get us started and set the stage, what are some of the things that Whelen is doing to address those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great lead off there. Yeah, I think almost to your point, the lighting going back to, just flick a switch, turn it all on, put light everywhere you can. It has evolved quite a bit. And I think, if we start there and we look at it, it's what is happening with the technology available to the lighting manufacturers, right? So at the time you're talking about quartz and halogen and all that. That's what was available, and that's what people used. As we at Whelen furthered the designs and our research around that technology, more technology was coming out. In the warning side, we started to see strobe tubes, things like that. And then along came LEDs, and that changed everything. And so we started adjusting our designs around that. And anytime we're doing one of those designs, we're kind of evaluating the end user's needs, we're evaluating the OEM's needs. And those are all the things that, basically the two main pillars that we're going to concern ourselves with when we're trying to further our designs. And so specific to your first point, some of the challenges that we look at, and big one that I hear about a lot from my position is current draw. It's power. So at the end of the day, you've got these apparatus that have a whole bunch of other equipment on it. And those different areas of the apparatus are evolving as well, just like we are. And therefore, they're getting fancier and they're drawing more power and they have bigger needs. And so, when we talk to the OEMs, we often, if I come there with a new product, the first question I hear is how much power? And it's typically because it's not endless. And these apparatus have a limit to what they can power. And so they're looking to us to say, hey, how can we do more with less power? And so we take that back and we're looking at ways that we can be more efficient. How can we further this? And, I'm going to keep referencing your starting point there is, I think throwing lights on a tower, sending up and just trying to dump light everywhere is one approach. But as you start to try to like maximize those designs and limit that power consumption, make sure those batteries stay on, or maybe you don't have to rely on a generator as much. Because that's another trend you kind of see happening where people aren't putting generators on. We start to like break up the use cases and say like, okay, like where do you need the light? And what is the function that you're performing? Because if you think about an apparatus that's blocking, well, the blocking side, we don't really need to illuminate with, all sorts of light all over the place. You got oncoming traffic. What's really going on that side? There's not much going on. It's really on the other side. So like having that individual control, use specific lighting and kind of advancing to that. Then I can keep going and going and going on it if you want.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, how much of how much of what you provide is application driven? So like by that I mean, we just talked about blocking. Okay, well, when a lot of times when that truck is blocking, it's on an angle. So say they're working off the side of the road or something like that, or say that they're blocking, but and pretend this is the non-blocking truck. So a lot of times you have a truck that comes up and then does the blocking for you. But say you're the rescue truck on scene. You've positioned yourself to block traffic, but the car actually is not, because there's so much truck mounted lighting these days. So there's the truck mounted lighting is going to go at that angle, but if the vehicle that you're working on is not within that angle, then you got to start to think about probably light towers or portable lighting or things like that. But so that's where I'm kind of getting at, like how much of what you provide is application driven in terms of what the fire service is looking for?
Oh man, that is an awesome question. Then I go a bunch of different ways, and hopefully we have enough time. But a lot of it is application based. That is, like, if you really want to sum it up, that is the key, because again, going back to the power, you look at the variables, you look at all the things that you got to deal with when you're designing the light and you're trying to get it on an apparatus. You really got to start thinking about those applications, and then categorically try to figure out, okay, like what's appropriate in this category of lighting as opposed to this category of lighting. So for instance, I think some good words to start throwing out there is things like perimeter, load lights. You think about work lights, you think about scene lights. And I think far too often in conversations, people kind of casually, they'll just say things like illumination. And it's like, well, we should probably dive a little bit deeper into what the heck that means. Because to your point, it is that application. And so, if you're just trying to light up that work area, you're going to have different requirements that you're going to put on to the product that you want to place there. So like, let's look at perimeter lighting, for instance. Like just by that name, I mean, all these words, they're just kind of normal to me at this point. But it is to light up that perimeter. So you don't really need to be dumping a ton of light there. You don't need to be driving LEDs to this maximum so that you are like basically winning a horsepower race on your perimeter lighting. You're trying to light up let's say a 5 foot wide by 10 foot wide area. What do we need to do to provide the best spread of light within that area? It's things like that we're after.
Now, you mentioned throwing light out, the perimeter lighting, figuring out where you want the lighting to go. And that gets into, visibility. What do we on the scene want to be able to see? And, that if you're going into a fire department and they're just saying, well, we just want to illuminate, you know what I mean? Like you just said, you have to, almost be our consultant at that point, to explain a lot of different things to us. So how would, when you talk about that, how do you measure visibility? And how do you know what actually matters when you're measuring?
Yeah, so this is a topic. This is a topic that I have been dealing with for a very long time over at Wheeling. Even to this day, I still hear it. And I think there's a couple different approaches. So I could potentially draw your audience to a full sleep with the very overly scientific approach, and get that. I like to joke around and call it a super nerdy approach, that we could go with this. And then I think there's some in between that I believe the industry, my opinion, the industry is very hungry for and trying to understand. And then there's like I don't want to hear any of this and just give me the biggest number and that approach. And I think I see a lot of that today, and I kind of get it because it is a lot. And I think that a lot of my lighting manufacturers, we've all been kind of struggling on how to communicate that stuff, and what is the right balance of getting super scientific about it. Because look, I can recognize in my travels that when you're doing a spec for a fire truck, you're not going to get that in depth just on one light. You have so many things that you're trying to plan out and figure out for your apparatus that you don't have the time to spend 3 days, studying light output. But it is about visibility. And I think the big thing to think about there is a measurement that you can make on visibility, and that comes down to a term we call foot candles. And what's hard there is that it's kind of a range, and you want to look at things in a like a holistic area, and you want to say like, okay, how much visibility am I getting in that area? And that's where you can get really complicated with it. And then people get, and they're just like, I see lumens, and this one has 1,000 lumens. This one has 1,500 lumens. So the 1,500 must be better. And I struggle with that because I think that one number doesn't actually provide you the full story as to what is going on. Because you could have one product that has 1,500 lumens, and it has an optic, a reflector, that's positioning that light very tight. And it's going to put this beam down, right? Let's just use that for the example. And it's going to put this beam of light down in one spot, and you're going to have all this like really high visibility in one area. So let's go back to that perimeter light, idea, an example, and say, well, is that tight little 1 foot by 1 foot beam going to serve your purpose for your 5 foot by 10 foot area? Probably not. But let's go look at this other product that's 1,000 lumens, and it's got a different optic, and it's spreading it, and it's putting the light over here and over there, and it's got this even distribution, creating this clean, even visibility pattern on the ground in that 10 foot by 5 foot area. Which one do you want? And I think that kind of like, that's the thing that people are really needing to think about when they're speccing things.
As you were talking, I was just thinking about, these, and it really, what we just described is kind of going into the application that it's going to be used for as well. Would you say it's more important where the light is going than necessarily how bright that light is?
100%. Like, I cannot stress that enough, because if you're speccing your apparatus and you're looking at all the lights and you're saying to yourself, okay, like I got 3 products for this application, and you don't take the time to think about where that light's going, Where is it? What's the visibility pattern that's being placed out there? You're likely just going to pick the higher number because that's the safe bet, right? In your mind, if you're not going to take the time to understand all this, you're probably just be like, oh, the higher number, right? It's like buying a car. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to buy the one with the biggest horsepower because that probably goes the fastest. But you're not looking at all the other options and understanding what's really going on there. So, yeah, it really comes down to understanding where that light goes and how it's being emitted, and that spread of light.
What's the science that goes into it? I know you said, like you had your kind of nerdy answer, but there is a lot of science that goes into the innovations that Whelen is introducing to the fire service. Talk a little bit about the science that goes into that, because I really think that is important too. It's not, you're not just throwing stuff together and just directing it in different places. I mean, there is a lot that goes in on the back end before I ever see it on a demo truck, or even on a truck you might bring to my fire department that has all your different products on it. So talk a little bit about that science.
Yeah, that's a fun one. So typically the way we approach it at Whelen is, we want to understand what the application is. So we'll bring it back to that, right? And so it's like we'll do the perimeter light. We'll just keep using that example. So from there, I'm actually in my role, I'm going to look at, okay, what is the use case? What are we trying to accomplish? All right, we want to make a perimeter light. From there, I'm going to basically set out some requirements to say, hey, engineering team, we want to make this light, and it's a perimeter light. And that perimeter is going to be this zone, let's say, or an area. And I'll use that 5 foot by 10 foot because that's typically where that's going to be. And I'm going to say, this is the space that I want to put light, and I want it to be as bright as possible. But I don't want it to exceed, let's say, 3 amps. Throw that out there as a number. And I'll just kind of list out those requirements. And then we dive in and we start to say, like, okay, how big can this be? What style of mounting? Like, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we would worry ourselves about. And what color do we want the housing? Is there options? Things like that. And so we'll start working through towards a concept. And in that phase of our development, we really start to lean on our optics team. So when you look at the way we develop products, we have a bunch of different development teams, but the team that I've got this project with, I'll basically give those requirements. We start to look at it, and I say, okay, like, what are the variables we can have here? And we get with the optics team and say, hey, this is the space we have. And then basically we have a bunch of mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and photometric engineers, and they all fight for space in the product, which is always a fun portion because the electric team wants it to be the board to be as big as possible. The mechanical team's like, well, I need a ton of heat sink space. And the optic team's like, well, no, I need all this space. And then we kind of negotiate all that. And then what happens is we'll really focus in on the optic design. And we say, okay, like, this is how much space you have. And we need to develop an optic, a reflector, and all that to put that light in that area. And so they basically work within the bounds that we gave them, and they'll take the light output that comes off of an LED, and they'll say, okay, if we have this LED in here, it's going to spread light all over here. We can capture this light and we can redirect it into this area, and we'll put this optic in here that'll help spread it. And then we just start working through that. And what we'll do is we'll make some prototypes and we'll run some tests. So Whelen, we're extremely fortunate because we have photometric tunnels and a bunch of equipment that we can go through and evaluate and say, hey, if we put an LED here, we put a optic here, and we put this reflector here, the light's going to end up out like this. And then we start tweaking that. We'll evaluate that data, and we'll take that zone and we'll actually break it up into smaller zones. And there'll be little 1 foot by 1 foot squares. And we'll say, like, okay, we've got to 5-foot candles here, but this one is going to be 10-foot candles, and this over here is 15, and then it goes back to 5, and then we start to like adjust things accordingly through the design and through a bunch of stuff that those guys know way more about than I do. And they basically adjust all that stuff, and we work towards the end result that would come your way.
So now, when we talk a bit about specifications, which we've touched on a little bit, but I'm just thinking in terms of not every truck is the same, so that must become a little challenging to you. And I'm just thinking about truck mounted lights, where you want that light to go depends A, where you're going to mount it, and B, like how tall that truck is going to be. How much does that do you find that you then have to do some customization for those types of jobs, or do you find that there's a wheeling product for just about any kind of height or any kind of mount? Because I'm just thinking in terms of if you have a truck and you mount and the truck is 9 feet tall and you mount it at the top and you get it to where you want it to be, that angle is going to be different for a truck that's 11 feet tall or 10 feet tall. So how is it just that there's different model numbers for every one of those, or does that mean that you have to get into doing some custom work? Because whenever you start getting into those custom types job, that creates a need for engineering, and of course then there are cost ramifications and stuff like that. But I mean, if that's something that happens, it's also important that people know that can occur as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. So we do evaluate what is happening. I mean, obviously we've been doing this for a couple minutes and, we have a good knowledge base and understanding of what goes on all the different fire apparatus. And from our standpoint, they're all not the same, but there is some commonality through it, right? So like if you think about down the side of an apparatus, we could look at an ambulance. It's going to be 2 scene lights. It's going to be 2 warning lights on the side of the vehicle. Down on the bottom, there's an opportunity for some perimeter lighting. You get to the back, it's like, I know they're going to put 2 scene lights over there. Like those things are pretty standard. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, when we're developing products, we kind of base it off of that. And we know that, hey, these things are typically going to be within that 8, 9, 10 foot height ranges. And then we try to adjust accordingly and create a product that's like, regardless of where you install this, whether it's 9 feet or 10 feet, you're going to have a pretty similar output. And that being said, we do custom stuff. Somebody comes to us and they really have a need or they have a problem statement, we're listening, and that's typically my job, is to try to say, hey, like that's a great idea. Like how can I leverage that, and how can I make something that would suit you and potentially others? And maybe that's a use case that we didn't really understand. But in general, we pretty much have it covered. When it comes to like, oh, you want a light there? We got one for that.
I wanted to talk about specifications just a little bit more, because this, there are different ways. Every fire department does things a little differently. But when we're sitting down to write our specifications, if there were, I don't want to put you too much on the spot here, but if there were like a top 3 things that you should be considering when you go down to sit there and go, okay, we've just pretend it's a pumper. We've looked at the pump. We've looked at how many discharges we want. We've done the warning lighting. Now we're going to decide what we're going to do for the scene. What are just some considerations that departments and apparatus purchasing committees should always be keeping in mind as they start to navigate the lighting options? Yeah,
that is a great question, and it is a difficult question.
So I tell you, I find so much, so many questions can be answered with, well, it depends.
Yeah, no, I won't do that to you. So I think the best thing to do there is to go back to what we were saying in that application, right? I think that's step one. Is to say let's not try to solve this with one product, because I think you're not doing yourself a you're doing yourself a disservice by just saying like I just want one product to throw up there and it's going to do everything I ever wanted. It's you're not going to find that product. And if you do, the OEMs are not going to be real happy with you because it's probably going to be like really big and it's going to draw a lot of power. So I think you got to approach the application, and then once you get focused there, you really got to start thinking about that light spread. This is where I think we run into the situation of there isn't a clear answer, and this is my I'll joke around. This is my long way of saying it depends. It's because it does. And I think that if you go back earlier in our conversation, I think that's kind of the rub. And that's where people kind of just go, must have 10,000 lumens. And they write that. And, I would respectfully say how'd you get to that? What is that really doing for you? So I'd almost urge you not to specify that, and just stick to what is the application. And you could do things like looking at the light source. You could say things like, must be an LED based system. You could look at things like the power consumption, must not exceed 10 amps, and really try to keep it simple to those things. And that's where my best suggestion there is to leverage the lighting manufacturers' websites and our literature. Go through all of them and look at everything that's out there, and then start to see what's going on, and say, hey, I've got lighting manufacturer A that makes a product for this application. And that product that I see there, I like the way that one looks. Hey, that draws 10 amps. Okay. And then go over to the next one and say, all right, lighting manufacturer B, I like the way that one looks for my application. And that one draws 9 amps. And you start to go through that, and you could basically try to narrow it down by utilizing, hey, it needs to be LED, needs to draw this much current. And if you want to go further, you can start to say must meet. NFPA is funny because they really only worry about the rear of the vehicle, so there isn't much there to leverage for you. But you could look at that light spread and try to leverage, it must have a spot optic or it must have a flood optic. So those two words can help kind of narrow down and filter what you're looking for at the end of the day. And then look, it could just come down to as simple as that's the one I want, and throw the manufacturer on there, and you're good to go. and because really what you're doing is communicating to the OEM what product you want in what location.
Okay. Today's purchasing environment, I don't expect it to change too much during 2026. We're trying to build trucks that are economical overall. It's getting a little tougher. The prices have kind of fluctuated in recent years. So we're always looking to get value out of everything that we spec on that truck. We're looking to get value out of it. So how do you get more value out of the lighting? And we're talking scene here, maybe not, or if you want to include the warning in there too, that's fine. But how do you get more value out of the lighting on a fire apparatus?
That's a fun question. That's a couple different ways to go with that one. I think it really comes down to looking at the features and understanding what you're getting out of it. So I'll start with the illumination, since that's really that's kind of been the main focus so far. Is you could have a product that shoots light all over the place, and it has one switch. It's simple, and you turn it on and light goes everywhere. That's not really what you need. You really want to be efficient. You want that current draw to be down. You want light over here. You may want some different features like, hey, I want to have a different intensity. I want to lower the intensity. There's specific to wheeling. There's some things we did, and not trying to do any product pitching here, but it's we came out a couple of years ago with our easy scene lights, and one feature that we threw on those was the dynamic turn on. So there's something that you're going to get a little bit more out of it, instead of having that instant turn on. So you start to look through those types of things and say, how many different things can I do with one light? So again, leaning on those easy scene lights, we provided there the ability to have 2 modes. So you could have more of a spotlight function, and then also that downward scene light type function. So it's hey, you can either accomplish that with 2 products, or you can accomplish that with 1 product. So I think that is would be my suggestion on evaluating all that. And when you're speccing it, is to figure out okay, what am I going to do with this thing? And then when you look across the landscape, you start to say to yourself, okay, what product is going to give me the most flexibility and functionality, and in short, the most bang for my buck.
If there was one takeaway you'd like the audience to have today, when they click off about lighting and everything that goes into it these days, what would that one takeaway be?
Don't skimp on the products you're putting on your apparatus. I can 100% speak for Wheeling, and I feel confident in saying even for the other lighting manufacturers out there, we're not just making toys. We're not just making stuff to sell stuff. We're trying to solve problems. We're trying to create a range of products to help you guys, and not create more work for you. And so really take the time when you're speccing and really evaluate the entire system that you're putting in, and choose something that is going to serve your needs. And work with your reps and look on the websites and read the features, read the spec sheets, get a rep out there to do a demo. And you mentioned earlier about pulling up with a truck to show you lights. Don't ignore those, because that's going to be your best bet to say oh, I see where that light goes. I need that. But take the time. It's worth it. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Well, again, my thanks to you for sitting down with me today. When you think about it, we've really only just scratched the surface on a lot of this stuff, but I definitely think this is a perfect way for people to get kind of a baseline to figure, okay, and really that application, I think I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because I started to think about the fact that when we're building fire apparatus, it's the mission. What is that truck going to do when it gets there? And that sort of guides you with everything else. So what are you expecting that light to do when you get there? And that sort of guides that whole decision-making process. So I realized, this was a great, we gave people a lot of food for thought. That is for sure today. But my thanks to you for sitting down with me today to talk about this. If there are other lighting questions that you have, please let me know. We can certainly do another podcast on them sometime. You can either email me at chris.mcloon@clarionevents.com, or you can use our contact us link that is on our website. All of our web podcasts are archived, so you can go to fireapparatus.com/podcast to catch up on all of them. They're all organized according to podcasts, and there is a page that just has all of them together, so you can go and peruse them and find a topic you like. But again, John, thank you very much for joining me today. Again, this has been Chris McClune with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Have a good one and stay safe. Thanks again, John.
Thanks.